Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Monday, October 24th City Council meeting. I call this meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Please join me in a mindfulness moment to the start of our meeting. This isn't mandatory, so if you don't feel like doing this, it's okay. You can close your eyes or look downward with a soft gaze or just sit quietly. Let's bring attention to our breath. Notice how you are breathing right now. Notice how you are sitting, whether you are at home watching or if you're in the council chambers with City Council. And shake away your stress of Monday and find a way to be relaxed and alert. And having your attention on your breath, take some deeper, slower breaths. Exhale. Give yourself permission to let go of your busy day. Another breath. It's important that we welcome each other into our shared community meeting space. Welcome each other. And be mindful that we are here to problem solve, to listen, thoughtful, be non-judgmental. And remember to wish yourself well. I'm very grateful that you are here and being a part of this conversation, and be involved in your local government. We have some really, hard, tough topics tonight on our agenda. And your council folks have worked really hard to be prepared and understand the issues and understand the perspective of our residents, as there are many. So one last breath and we'll blow out. So let's start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, and thank you for participating. Pledge of Allegiance to
the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Clerk, can we have roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem James.
Here.
Councilmember Leaks May.
Here.
Councilmember Mikulski.
Here.
Councilmember Polika.
Here.
Mayor Piana.
Here. And that agenda is approved unanimously. And next up is presentations, and we have only one presentation tonight. And
Mayor, I believe that was just roll call.
What?
I think that was just roll call.
Oh my gosh, I'm already starting off. I guess I did my mindful breathing and I went into a space where I all right, can we have approval of agenda, please?
Mayor, I move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Support. Moved by Leaks James and supported by Mikulski. Oh my God, I did it again.
It's a day.
It really is a Monday. And supported by Mikulski. Mr. Clerk.
Leaks May.
Yes.
Mikulski.
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Polika.
Yes.
Piana.
Yes. All right, next up is presentation, and it is one of our more fun presentations of the year, and it is the 2022 Ferndale Beautification Awards, and looks like we have a special presenter tonight to help give out the awards.
Indeed we do.
Come on up. And what character do we have tonight joining us from the Beautification Commission?
First of all, I want to thank the Ferndale City Council for allowing, and not allowing, but enabling and encouraging us to have fun in Ferndale. I really appreciate that. And second, I'd like to thank all the members of the Beautification Commission who participated, including Laura McCluskey and Michael Larry, and it was really a great event. So without further ado, I'd like to present the awards. We had a really great time. The first one, let's see, the first one is Melanie Miller, and that is for 236 East Spencer.
Come on up, congratulations.
Tell us a little bit about your project, because it was really fun, and what encouraged you.
For some reason, I got really into crows this year.
Can you come up to the microphone?
I got really into crows this year for some reason, so the whole thing was kind of inspired by crows. That's why we have scarecrows. There's crows all over the fence, things like that. So yeah, I just had fun this year.
It's fabulous, thank you.
It was really a pleasure seeing it, and no crows flew off and did a bird's thing. So.
Congratulations, and thank you for decorating your house.
Why don't we get our picture taken?
Okay.
Through the chair. What I also like about their decorations is it's something that you can see well during the daytime. It's not all done with lights where it's only, presentable or visible during the evenings. I like that too.
It is fabulous with lights, though.
I can try.
Yeah.
Absolutely fabulous.
Better at nighttime, is that what you're saying?
Love it at night.
Mr. Minus, who's next?
First, you need to tell us who you are.
Yes.
Our next person that did a fantastic job and needs congratulations is Tara Fetter, and she at 645 Flowerdale. And as I understand it, Eric, is that right? Ted. I knew I was going to screw it up. Ted is Tara's husband, and he is here on her behalf.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Can you tell us a little bit about your property? And I'm sure that you had some hand in working on it.
I just built it.
Oh, there you go.
Halloween is my wife's favorite time of year.
Okay.
It is her greatest holiday. And I fabricate, that's what I do. So with her desire and my fabrication, we just designed it.
That's great. And did you fabricated the wings, I imagine, the mechanical wings? Yeah.
That's awesome.
I do all that stuff.
Okay. I would encourage people to take a look at some of these properties, because they're really a fun thing to see. Let's get our picture
Thank you, sir.
taken. You
Yes,
bet.
sir.
Thank you for writing us with some entertainment.
I might buy and check them out.
I've been advised to tell you who I am. I'm actually, if you can't tell, I'm Ed Minus, and I'm the ringleader for this group of people that we call Okay, this was a really fun one as well. It's Christy Verminico, and she lives at 418 West Maplehurst. And I'll have to say a personal note on this one. I saw it going up for quite a while, and so it's been really fun to see how it has evolved over the last couple of weeks. no,
Probably-
why don't you accept on her behalf, and then, yeah.
Aw.
Well, you look pretty excited.
Halloween is her favorite time of year since she was a child. She puts so much into it. In fact, when I nominated her, she was in Salem, Massachusetts at the time. She goes annually, and she brought her kids this year, two of her kids this year, to get more Halloween stuff. The inside is even more amazing. How much stuff there is. Everything is spooky and unique, and she makes a lot of the stuff too, which is really cool. Upcycling and taxidermy and different things. Really committed to it. And this is her dream. She ran the marathon for the first time last week and then won this, and she might have been more excited. But she loves Halloween, and she'll be here.
Okay. And one of the unique things about, that Christy told me when I called her, was she was very excited, of course, and she also said that she wanted to make it very kid-friendly. So I thought that was really kind of nice. And again, please take a look at some of these houses. Okay, the next one is over the top. All of them were, but this one's really phenomenal. The Warren won in 2017, I believe it was, and he has again proved himself very worthy. The property is 140 East Maplehurst.
Can you move the mouse on the laptop there?
I'm sorry, what? Oh,
I think it went to sleep.
There we go.
I don't think that's it. Yeah, there it is.
Nope.
No, that's not it either.
They have to go backwards. There we go.
There it is. And he wanted to mention, or I was hoping he was going to be here, but he did mention that, oh, you're here, come on over here. I'm sorry. He wanted to, go ahead, tell us about what your motivation was, and then also tell him about the Saturday thing that you're going to do.
Well, Saturday's more of a family friends, but I will have it opened up Saturday. What you can't see on the picture here is there is 2 tents, which are all animatronics of clowns and different stuff. Plus, the porch is all done up too. And but come this weekend, I'm going to have things opened up in that. I have quite a few fog machines, bubble machines, and the music going, and all the lighting and that. So every year it's gotten a little bit over the top, but we started running with the circus theme, and it kind of just went off the rails.
I can relate to the circus.
Oh, yes. So,
All right, well, thank you, Warren. It was fantastic, and let's get our picture. Thank you again.
Thank you, ringleader. All right, so that is the end of presentations, and we're moving on to call the audience, and we set aside 30 minutes for residents or whoever is visiting today to talk about any topic on or off the agenda, and we ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes, and we have a mindfulness clock, and who's running that today from staff? Thank you, Kara. And so just wanted to remind folks about having respectful and courteous behavior during public meetings, and that we try to support all spectrums of belief and viewpoints from our residents, and that we have a supportive environment and a welcoming one for them to give their comments. And just as a reminder, please direct your comments to councils, because staff do not take direction from council, but they take it, council gives direction to staff. So please direct your comments to council. There we go. So Is there anybody in the audience who would like to kick off our comments today? Oops, there's someone behind you, Sharon. I'm gonna let you guys paper, scissors, rock. Hi there.
Hello, good city council and mayor. My name is Stephen Lemlin. My first object will be the Ferndale Memorial Association. We're having our usual Veterans Day event on the 11th at roughly 11 p.m., or sorry, a.m. And the speaker will be a gentleman named Mr. William Gamble. I have known this man for a while, and I think he will be an excellent speaker. The second thing I wanted to talk about was something that everyone in this room has helped with over the last few years, but we're still having a problem with. That would be the intersection at Republic and West Marshall. To say what's been happening, we asked for speed bumps. You put in speed bumps on West Marshall. Thank you very much. We had last year, the police chief can tell you, there was an incident there where some people gotten hit with a vehicle and some children. And the city went ahead and put up signs to tell people not to go down the street, not do these things. You put up 4 signs. I mean, you figure people do it. Then the good police chief and the police came out and they literally blocked the road. So I'm not saying everyone here has done something, and the good police chief can tell you, while we were waiting there to put our children on the bus, watching 2 police cars block the road, 3 people went past the bus, and the nice Ferndale police officers were good enough to give them tickets, literally watching them break the law. Police are not, they have enough to do. I would like to ask the council for help on coming up with a solution. I know we've had very inventive solutions on things like bike lanes and what we're doing in Woodward and things like that. I think that this has come to the point where, as we like to say in the military, we just can't have nice things. And it may need something like blocking the road in one direction, putting in bollards, or even cutting that road off. My question to the city is, who would we talk to as parents, and how do we go about improving that? Because everyone in this room has been trying to help, but we just don't know the right way to fix this, and it's not the police's responsibility to do it every day. They can't be there twice a day. We need something that's if you want to call it a road-based solution. And so my question is, who do we as parents go to look at this kind of stuff?
Thank you, Steve, for that comment. I think leave it to the city manager here, but I do think we have maybe a partner too in the school district. They could probably help, because this is about driver education, about being mindful of buses, right?
On that street, people come over 45 miles per hour on a 25 zone. They blow through the stop signs because they know that police can't be in that area. It's basically a quick way to get around lights and other things. So that's why cutting off the street was one of the things we were thinking, because it's been 20 years that I've been there and nothing has worked.
Well,
through the chair, Stephen, I'll connect with you.
Thank you, sir.
After this, and I'll begin the conversation, but I'll have an internal review with the police department and our economic development team initially, and then we'll go from there.
But thank you very much. Everyone has been working on this. This is not a complaint. I just want that to be clear.
yeah. It's a design solution, and I know our slow zones is part of
Spikes.
Spikes.
Bollards, they work better. I use them in Iraq.
Part of our mobility plan is slow zones. So, and that is some more design treatments for our streets than what we've done with humps. More than humps. Hi, Sharon. Welcome. It's good to see you.
Thank you. I've missed you guys, but our meetings have not been coinciding. So it's like I keep having to postpone our meetings, and then they come up on city council. But I'm Sharon Chess. I'm president of the Ferndale Community Concert Band, and we're about ready to start our season on this Sunday. So our very first concert for our 8th season is this Sunday, October 30th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at the Ferndale High School in the auditorium there, and the concerts are free. We do a musician bake sale immediately following. We're more than happy to accept door donations, and now we have Venmo, or you can donate via our PayPal, or you can just, if you have pocket cash on that particular day, you're more than happy to drop something in the bucket. But I hope you guys all come to our first concert on October 30th at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Do we want to grab them with a photo? Oh, they all just left.
He took them outside.
Okay, great. All right, are there Oh. Sorry, folks, we're going to take a pause and take one photo from the Beautification Awards. So pause on public comment. Back to public comment. Is there anybody else who would like to give public comment? All right. Seeing no one else would like to give public comment, we're going to move on to the consent agenda, and I will read the items in their entirety, and council can make their motion. So 8A, approval of the October 10, 2022 meeting minutes. 8B, approval of interlocal agreement between the City of Ferndale and the Downtown Ferndale Development Authority. 8C, payment of tuition for paramedic school for 2 personnel at the cost of $15,290. 8D, consideration of Versa Climber purchase from Versa Climber at cost of $4,665.50. 8E, approval of payment to Ferndale Public Schools in the amount of $3,321.82 for transportation services rendered for the 2022 Ferndale Summer Day Camp Program. 8F, approval of the 1-year agreement for the use of the Southwest Storage Yard as a transfer site of leaves by South Oakland County Refuse and Recycling Authority, and authorization for DPW Director and Interim City Clerk to sign the agreement. 8G, approval to renew Avalon camera licenses for city facilities in the amount of $9,160. 8H, approval of the annual cleaning and repair of firefighter turnout gear in the amount of $2,654.50. 8I, consideration of election inspector pay pre-approval for the November 2022 general election. 8J, approval of the bills and payrolls as submitted by the city manager's office and subject to review by the council finance committee. What is the pleasure of council?
Mayor, I move to approve the items on the consent agenda as stated.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem James and supported by Leeks May.
James.
Yes.
Leaks May.
Yes.
Mikulski.
Yes.
Polika.
Yes.
Piana.
Yes, and that is approved unanimously. All right, so next up is our regular agenda, and we have 2 items tonight, and the first item is 9A, authorization of the replacement fire engine from Help Fire at the cost of $652,261. Just-in-time delivery of our fire chief. Welcome, and do you want to introduce the city manager?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair, Chief Robinson will present this item. She'll give you a walkthrough about the apparatus recommendation and the finance details. As we've discussed previously, we will be recommending the use of ARPA funds to fund the purchase of this. I am very grateful for those federal funds. It's a significant, costly item, but it is a necessary item for us to stay on top of, and I'm supportive of replacing this engine that is currently well out of
I got it.
All right, we're just going to take a minute to set up here the PowerPoint presentation on the laptop. So stand by, everybody.
And I apologize for my tardiness. I was actually on a fire engine. That's why I was late, so I apologize. Okay, so just to walk through this to make sure everybody has the information, it just a quick overview. As the city manager stated, we are coming to you tonight with a request to make a fire engine purchase for the Ferndale Fire Department. Our current fleet has 4 engines, or sometimes called pumpers. And based on the NFPA 1901 standard, and NFPA is National Fire Protection Association, they are the standards that kind of guide and inform our profession. They recommend at 15 years, fire apparatus goes to reserve status, and at 25 years, it'd be removed from status. The reason those recommendations are in place, at 15 years goes to reserve with, and it's, the secondary part of that is you're supposed to update safety, things that have changed, because now it's 15 years old. You're supposed to bring it up compliant with the safety standards. At 25 years old, they figure it's be very difficult to bring it up to current safety standards, so they recommend going out of service. Our current fleet, you see it there, we have 4, like I said, 4 engines. One is a 1996 Pierce. The Pierce is the manufacturer. We have a 2002 Pierce, a 2009 Sutphin, and a 2017 Pierce. So our engines are 26, 20, 13, and 5 years old at this time. So one has already exceeded what the NFPA recommends for being in service, and the other one in 5 years is set to be out of service, and one in 2 years should be going to reserve status. So again, this purchase and moving forward is trying to keep us in a good position, make sure we have a well-functioning fleet that meets the safety standards. So why do we need 4 engines? We have 2 fire stations, so I want to make sure everybody understands why do we need 4 engines if we have 2 fire stations. You always need a replacement, so a frontline engine or pumper needs preventative maintenance, goes down for repairs, something happens, you need something else to switch into to maintain services. That's one reason. Another one is anytime we have an incident, kind of like this picture is actually one of our structure fires we had earlier this year, so this is really one of ours, it's not just something off the internet. When we're there, we're going to be there for a significant amount of time. So we immediately call back other firefighters from home. They need apparatus to staff so they can try to maintain services for the rest of the city, because other people may have emergencies while we're tied up on emergencies such as what you see here. So having those other apparatus allows that to be done also. And simply put, reserve apparatus are just necessary for us to maintain our operations. This picture here is actually the drawing of the engine that we spec. And I want to point out a couple things. If you're familiar with our apparatus, engine 1, our most recent purchase, is larger, it's taller. This one is being built, or will be built in a spec to match the rest of our fleet, the lower, the little bit smaller engines. And it was actually specifically designed to fit inside fire station number 2. So when we did this, it was very purposeful as far as going to the station, measuring the space, height, width, length, and ensure that whatever we built and purchased was going to properly fit in that station and meet our needs. So there was no retrofitting that would need to occur to make the building fit what we purchased. We were very purposeful and really avoided anything that was just wants excessive. We stayed away from upgraded suspension and things like that, that we felt like that's not the best spending or use of the money. So again, we tried to keep it very purposeful and stick to things that were just most important for us to provide good level service and have very efficient, effective operations. A couple things I just want to identify about this. Again, this is going to be a Pierce. We did choose to go with the Pierce. My goal is to get us back to a standardized fleet, so all of our apparatus are from the same manufacturer. That makes it easier for maintenance from the garage, because there's just one manufacturer and parts that they're drawing off of. It is designed with seating compartments to promote optimal effectiveness of operations. I reduced the number of firefighter seats on the back end just because we're never going to have 6 firefighters sitting on the apparatus, and I wanted to increase storage for the crucial equipment we do want to carry to provide that level of service, like a Lucas on our engines. And right now you don't have the proper storage for it. So all of that was thought about in designing this, to put the money to design it so it's really truly fits our fire department and our community's needs. At the bottom, the 1,000-gallon water tank is how much water it has on it, and it's 1,500 GPM pump. That probably doesn't really mean anything to you. That is important for us for making sure we have what we need to initiate operations until we can get hooked to a fire hydrant. This also ties into some other standards, and we'll go through audits such as the ISO audit. It'll help us in our evaluation to give us the most points in when they're looking at our fleet. The last part, Class A foam, that's a deviation from our other ones where Class B foam was the bigger one. We all know Class B foam has been in the news a lot for the PFAS. All of our Class B foam was removed. We have not put replacement foam back on. But we have, Class B is, if you've taken extinguisher training, B is for like boiling or flammable liquids. So we use Class B for hazmat incidents. Thank goodness we don't have as many of those as we do Class A, which is ordinary combustibles, house fires, and other things that are burning. So Class A foam would allow us to use it on structure fires. It is shown to actually make water wetter. As funny as that sounds, makes it much more effective in putting out the fire. But the other part of it is early research is showing that this actually improves the environment and removes a lot of the toxins out of the air when we're using Class A foams in firefighting efforts. So now it makes the environment safer and removes some of those things that are giving us cancer or causing harm to maybe occupants are still in the area. And so it helps with health and wellness of our firefighters also. So we did put Class A foam on this. There is no Class B foam compartment or capabilities on this, but we could still have that capability other ways, so we don't need to spend the money to put that onto the apparatus. The cost, the unfun part of this request, right? So I do have two sides here, and this is one of the driving factors why I'm in front of you today. If we place the order and complete this prior to November 1st, we're going to beat a price increase that's coming. The price increase will be significant. The cost of the engine is $672,190. With no down payment, full payment due upon delivery of the fire apparatus, and the estimated build-out time for the one we spec'd is 16 months, which is great because other fire departments are talking about having to wait 2.5 to 3 years for theirs. If we do an advanced prepayment and pay for the whole thing right now, we get an additional $19,712 discount on the front end, and then it'll be paid for, but we have to do that. So it brings the cost to $652,478. If we complete this, if we place an order after November 1st, the cost of the engine goes up to $715,442. It's over a $43,000 increase. And that's no down payment. Again, you can add the prepayment, but it's a significant jump. I found out about this. We already had a 13% increase by Cummins. Cummins is the manufacturer that makes the engine, and that was dropped on the manufacturers. That's already in play. With this other one coming and don't know anymore, that's why I wanted to bring it to you, because it's going to be a significant cost increase to the city. Again, why is this so important? Why do we, another driving factor of this? I wanted to look at not our 1996 engine that we know is 26 years old, it should be out of service, but our next two ones, and show you the comparison of repair costs. And again, why another benefit of moving something to reserve status as it gets older. The 2002 engine is 7 years older than the 2009, but over this period of 2015 to 2020, the 2009 has cost over $9,000 more to maintain with repairs that is needed because it's used more. 2009 is still one of our frontline engines, that's engine 2. So it's running every day on calls. So as they get older, just like with a car, as they get older, they can start breaking down more. When they're reserve status, you see the 2002 is 7 years older, but it's cost less to maintain because it's just used when it's needed. So I just wanted to kind of show the cost savings that happens from frontline to reserve with that slide. So what is creating this need for me to ask for a decision tonight on this? We did do an Assistance to Firefighters grant. We applied for this grant. The grant was supposed to already be announced. This grant, we wrote it to provide 90% of, it's a 10% match because of our population. The population in your city determines what level of match you have. We are at 10%. So this grant would pay 90% of the cost of the engine, and I wrote the engine as a $675,000 cost. These have not been announced yet, so we don't know if we're going to get the grant or if we're not going to get the grant. And they were supposed to be announced by September 30th. Actually, they were supposed to originally be announced earlier this year. Then they said, oh, we're going to announce it by September 30th. They still have not, with no word when it go. I know they're really behind in reading these grants. So our purchase eligibility, and another thing for transparency, the grant, if we place any orders that are in process, the grant cannot be used for. The grant can only be used for a new order that is placed after you get your award announced. So doing this, we'd be committing to purchasing this engine. If months from now they identify and we are given the grant, we would have the ability to purchase a second engine with 90% of the cost covered. But we could not use it for this one that I'm asking for tonight. So I just wanted to make sure that was very clear, and again, for full transparency. The strict parameters make this purchase after award announcement design. Again, that's just with the grant, they're very, very stringent on that. There's rising costs, like I mentioned. The price increase have already occurred. The 13% of Cummins. You got this over $43,000 that's going to happen on November 1st, and that's just the one I know about. I don't know when the next wave of increases are going to happen. And my concern is this is going to get to, if we wait, we're going to be spending $100,000 potentially more for this engine. The grant is not guaranteed. They are very competitive, and even though I feel like we wrote a very strong grant, we just don't know if we're going to get it until it's actually awarded. And we know, but we do know this purchase is needed. I just, like I said, I didn't want to bore you with a lot, but I just wanted to hit some of the high points, and I'd be open to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Through the chair, thank you very much for explaining the parameters of the grant. Thank you for applying for the grant, and boy, that really puts us in a pickle of, risking not being awarded the grant and significantly increasing the cost versus, waiting and seeing and maybe, getting 90% covered. So, knowing that we can't divine the future, if the grant is awarded within a relatively short period of time, because we've still got just a week until November 1st. If we authorize tonight and you get word by the end of this week that the grant has been approved, how feasible is it to just make the purchase order either Friday or Monday or, closer to that deadline?
So that's a very good question. Believe me, and Joe and I have been in regular communication. I try to constantly keep him and Phil up to date. Hey, here's what I know, here's what I know. And really trying to watch this because I understand the ask it is of the city. The company has to have purchase order and money in hand prior to November 1st, or we lose some of our discount. We can figure out the 11th hour we can wait to hit the button to transfer the funds and make everything final. We have everything ready to go. We've done everything on the front end to try to prepare so that if we make this decision, we can move forward very efficiently. So we already have all the contracts, have the payment instructions, all that, so we ensure Phil knows, the city knows what we need to do to process that and the time it would take. So we could wait and just know that we'd have to pull the trigger if we don't find out. One of the things I want to point out, the reason I went back to this slide is our next oldest engine is 20 years old, which means in 5 years, we're going to take it out of service. About a year and a half to get an engine, which gives us 3.5-year window. And so if we say a few months from now we found out and we have 90% of that's $600,000 savings to the city to purchase a second engine, and then we could really put our fleet in a really good spot. The other thing I want to point out that I did not put on here, because it's kind of like the used car market, because new cars are so hard to come by, used cars now have really become very desirable, and they're also hard to find. The same thing has kind of happened on the emergency vehicle side. Some departments can't afford a new one or can't afford to wait the 3 years, whatever, for a new one. I looked up today as far as for the year, just real quick on the years of these vehicles, what is listed out there for used fire engines that are for sale. A 1996 fire apparatus I saw listed on the one site anywhere from 20 to 60,000, and the 2002 up to 120,000 that they're being sold for. Now, mind you, that's what they're listed for. I've heard that they're desired because, again, people need them, and some smaller departments. And it doesn't mean that we could put it, but ours could potentially have market value to recoup some of the costs. If we did find out, say 3 months from now, we got the grant, we could potentially pay the money, but when we sell those other apparatus, recoup that cost. I mean, obviously I can't promise, but at this point, they wouldn't have to go to the scrapyard. They actually do have some market value, if that helps.
That is really helpful. And one follow-up question. If we pull the trigger on a new engine and are subsequently awarded the grant, do you know whether there may be some opportunities if we make a second order relatively quickly to be eligible for a discount for, for essentially getting more than one, piggybacking off of that first order, or is that unlikely?
I'd have to check. One of the things I did with this, I don't know if you've ever heard of like HGAC or Sourcewell. They're cooperative purchasing that you can become a member of. So if you're a smaller department like us that aren't buying in large quantities, say like Detroit Fire Department, it allows you to leverage some of that. With the ambulance, we use the HGAC, which is a purchasing cooperative out of Texas, to get a discount. And when we were looking for the engine, the vendor actually compared to see which one, Sourcewell or HGAC, provided us the larger discount to try to maximize the most. I don't know if we could get more on top of that, but again, we've really tried to do our diligence to find any way to get discounts. There is, we could always at the time see if neighboring departments are also purchasing any Pierce, if we could put it in as a cooperative order, which then creates more. If Detroit, say, is about to buy, going to buy engines, if we could jump on their order to get the discount, those are all things that would be looked at. I just can't promise them.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I personally would be hesitant on purchasing 2 vehicles at the same time, only because we really put a strain then 25 years from now on the next council to have to then buy two vehicles at the same time because they might expire at the same time. So that's my personal feeling.
If I may, through the
Sure, go ahead.
chair, I just want to make sure, did I hear that once you get the grant, it's yours to just use? You can just hold on to it, or if you get it? Even if you, are you able to utilize that grant?
It has to be utilized what we wrote the grant for. So I can't switch it over and then buy, say, ambulances. I'd have to try to go through a process, try to get it approved. But essentially, you have to use it for what you say you're using it for. And AFG grants have a very tight parameter of fulfilling your end, which is why we had to do the work on the front end and designing the engine, because you're supposed to take receipt of it, I think within, say, a year of getting the award, which we know can't happen with the apparatus, so we automatically would apply for an extension. And again, I hope we get the grant, but there's no promise we're going to get the grant, and that's why, unfortunately, I think we need to consider this purchase with the idea that we may not get that grant, and if we wait for the grant and don't get it, we're still going to need an engine. What do we do? And that's the conundrum. I wish I had the answer on the grant. It would make this less muddy because we would know yes or no, and unfortunately I don't. I've tried to wait as long as I could, but with the price increases coming, I felt like it would be irresponsible for me not to come forward because of the cost it will have to the city.
I think what I was trying to ask is that if you do, if this goes through and this is approved tonight, and the grant does come through, what happens with that grant? Is it just loss? Or will you be able to, I'm asking, will you be able to still utilize it at some point for the other?
Yes.
Okay, so there's no expiration date or anything?
There probably is.
Yeah, you have to use it. That's what I was saying. You have a year.
Oh, you have a year.
So
Okay.
you're supposed to receive whatever, so in this case, we wrote for an engine. You're supposed to receive whatever you were awarded the grant for within a year of the grant being awarded. Well, we can't receive an apparatus that quick, so we would actually apply for an extension, and we would be able to get it granted because the order would be placed. They would not guarantee an extension to just sit on it and not be moving forward with the purchase, because they want that money spent. If you said you needed it, and then you're not spending it, they're gonna say, well, I thought you needed it. And they'll probably just ask for it back and give it to somebody else. We don't want that, because that's $600,000 if we get it that we don't want to lose.
Right.
And I understand Councilman Polika's concern. Is it ideal to have two that potentially would be a year apart in age? That's not ideal. However, that's something that through the years, if we plan appropriately with our other fleet, we could still get us in a rotation that's, can proactively look at that and set us up for success for that transfer over at that time, so it doesn't be two replacements at the same time. So, and that's that proactive, that's the strategic plan, those things that you would put in there to ensure you're now avoiding another situation. So it's that planning.
Yeah, that's a lot of stress to put on a council to pay, you know, well, in 25 years, you're probably looking at $2 million for two, you know, two
And that's why
rigs.
we'd want to kind of try to get back to the plan of, which is our city policy as far as replacement and work and specking. It's same like when all the bottles and the SCBA's got purchased for the fire department and all the turnout gear got purchased. Those have life too, but then you start building in, okay, we understand we had to do it as a single purchase up front because of a grant, but now let's put it into a plan where we're replacing so many every so many years, so now it stretches it out. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And we'd want to do the same thing with fire apparatus to set them up for success 20 years down the road.
I have a question, sort of unrelated to the purchase tonight of the, because I'm assuming, I support purchasing the fire truck, putting the order in tonight, but I also don't want to lose the grant if, in the event that it is awarded to the city. I went and looked on Pierce Fire Truck Manufacturing, because I wanted to learn about fire trucks, and they have an electric truck now, and the city in Wisconsin is using it, so is there a way to explore that down the road if we get the grant money? Because I could see us maybe just exploring that option if it's affordable. Of course, they don't have the prices for an electric fire truck on the website. I'm assuming it's out of our price range. But you don't know with, you know, a grant covering 90%. So I don't know if that would be eligible of an expense at that time or not.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're correct about, so the emergence of electric fire engines and fire apparatus is new. They really just started hitting the market. So there's a couple places, Wisconsin is one of them, and then California actually has one station that they just announced is going to be all electric vehicles in there, and they're truly, think they're like field testing these vehicles for the manufacturers to help work out the quirks and solidify and improve that. You know, with this, it's always something as far as moving toward our goals for sustainability and environmental impact. We would obviously need people, have the infrastructure in place and consider, but they're new, like I said, out, and it's coming online. And I think see how these first ones do as they're working out the bugs, but I'd have to check to see if we'd be allowed to do that adaptation. Because you had to submit quotes to show that you legitimately were looking at them, but if we said, hey, we want to switch over to this, just understand, if we wrote for $675,000, so their match was say $600,000, that's not quite 10% off, but just for easy math. If we choose a vehicle that's now $800,000, they're not going to increase their percentage.
Right.
It's just going to be whatever we wrote the grant for, so we would just be on that extra.
Okay.
But yeah, that is an emergency technology that is starting to quickly evolve.
Yeah. I have a feeling an electric fire truck at this time would not match our fire station infrastructure, and that would probably require more investment, probably more than the actual fire truck. But who knows? All right. Are there any more questions about our fire truck and how we're paying for it? Can you tell us how we're paying for this fire truck?
Yes, through the chair, we are paying for this using federal ARPA funds. The city received about $1.9 million. We will be deducting this from that balance, and we will have an updated summary of the ARPA balance sheet. This is the second public safety oriented purchase, but stepping back, the original intent for the federal use of ARPA dollars was principally to offset issues, economic issues related to the pandemic, and/or support public safety, and/or support city strategic priorities. And so we are following the guidance of ARPA.
Through the chair, should we get the grant, the difference would be then would be brought back into the ARPA account.
Through the chair, it looks as if announcements were made and we did not get the grant.
Are you serious? What?
Oh, my goodness.
What do you mean? How did you find that out? 11th hour?
Yes.
So to
The
fill this
assistance
up-
for firefighter grants were published on the FEMA website today and their grant awards, and we were not awarded.
Oh, well,
right.
well, that,
Well,
I wasn't
Solve
trying
that.
to jinx
Last
us
10
when I
minutes of
said, I wish we knew. Hey, I'm gonna keep trying, I'm gonna keep working. So, I
I'm
did
sorry.
it this
Susan
time,
was
but doesn't
here.
mean I won't try again.
I'm sorry that you did not get the grant. We did not get the grant. It's disappointing when you don't get them. You gotta keep trying.
I do know they're very competitive but yeah, I won't give up. I'm gonna keep going after grants to help us out with our purchases. But I guess that clears it up. I wasn't trying to jinx us, but I said it'd be easier if we do.
through the
Joe, you
chair,
weren't supposed to come back with that news. I swear I didn't know before I gave it. But I guess that now puts us in a position where we truly have to make a decision and know how we'd be funding it.
through the chair, do they let us know why a grant might not be awarded so that we can improve ourselves the next time we submit a grant? Is there a way to ask?
We can ask. I will tell you there's an exorbitant volume of applications, so I don't know that they tailor it. I do know that they specifically are looking at distressed communities and prioritizing distressed communities. They wouldn't classify Ferndale as a distressed community.
Yeah, but we serve a distressed community.
We do serve it, which was included
That
in
was
the,
included in the
grant
grant.
application.
All right, well, we need a motion to proceed.
I move to approve the purchase of a replacement fire engine from Halt Fire at the cost of $652,261 to be contingent on the review of the contracts by the city manager and city attorney as to legal form as submitted by the fire chief.
Moved by Polika and supported by Mikulski. For clerk.
Polika.
Yes.
Mikulski.
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Leaks May.
Yes.
Kiana.
Yes. All right, that passes unanimously, and hopefully we will have a fire truck in 2 years.
Thank you very much. Well, I guess it's a 16-month build out on the fire engine, and I found out that our ambulance got pushed back to a 2024 chassis. So they might both be arriving at the same time, so it'll be a nice ribbon cutting.
Well, I hope they come in a more timely manner,
Thank
along
you.
with our DPW trucks for Dan. So, all right, we're moving on to our final regular agenda item, and it's 9B, consideration of the Citizens Police Advisory and Review Board ordinance. And introducing this is are you introducing this, Councilwoman? So we have a slight change in procedure tonight. We have Councilwoman James presenting on the Citizens Police Advisory and Review Board ordinance as a member of the city's ordinance committee and a champion of this because of her legal expertise as a civil rights lawyer. She has really led this initiative on behalf of City Council, and she asked to give a presentation. Just also want to say that Councilwoman Mikulski is also on the ordinance committee, and they've done together, been a duo team working out where we currently are. And I expect a pretty robust conversation tonight about something that we discussed almost 2 years ago now during the pandemic of our anti-racism declaration. So with that, I appreciate you going to the podium and giving a presentation on behalf of council, but also an update for our residents. So I'm going to let you take it away.
All right, my pleasure, and any audience members are sworn as to the comfy shoes that I wear usually behind the dais, so I appreciate your discretion on that. And before I forget, I do want to thank, as the mayor sort of queued up for me, thank and acknowledge the work of the ordinance committee, myself, Councilmember Mikulski, the city manager's office, the city clerk, and especially the city attorney for doing the lion's share of the wordsmithing at our direction. I also appreciate the time of Police Chief Emmy that he put into talking through these processes and providing insight from the law enforcement perspective, and also a special thanks to the assistant to the city manager, Denicia Woods McSwain, for shepherding this project, including providing the slides for me tonight. And I want to take a moment to reflect on the intentions and potentially the misperceptions about this proposed ordinance. The proposed board, if established, should neither be anti-police nor pro-police. It's really intended to be pro-transparency, pro-community engagement, and pro-due process. It's a continuation of the work initiated by the prior city council that adopted a community-oriented policing model in 2016, which was born out of President Obama's task force on 21st century policing. Philosophically, the model focuses on repositioning police as guardians or protectors, led by community engagement as opposed to warriors focused solely on enforcement. The implementation guide for the 21st century policing model calls on local governments to take the following 5 steps: create listening opportunities with the community, allocate government resources to implementation, conduct community surveys on attitudes toward policing and publish the results, define the terms of civilian oversight to meet the community's needs, and recognize and address holistically the root causes of crime. Notably, when former Mayor Dave Coulter and former Police Chief Tim Collins jointly announced this new policing model to the community, they emphasized that this change in style would take years to implement. Since that time, the Ferndale Police Department has revived the Citizen Police Academy, established a community engagement officer, held numerous street-side roundtables for engaging residents, has proactively applied for and obtained accreditation by the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police, and has launched a data transparency dashboard. I don't know why I almost said trashboard, oops. and our data dashboard, by the way, is I would say heads above our peers that have minimal data, whereas ours goes well beyond. And we also have a partnership with Common Ground to provide crisis intervention as needed, among many other initiatives. The city's also taken steps beyond the police department to promote equity and inclusion, like banning the box, which removes conviction and arrest history questions on city employment applications, banning the use of facial recognition technology, establishing a racial equity action team, banning source of income discrimination for renters, and other programs and policies. So this proposed ordinance that we're discussing tonight is another step in that process, one that would significantly increase the ability of residents to take leadership in giving advice and guidance to police leadership. So I urge the community and my colleagues on council to view this through the lens of collaboration and continuing to strive for excellence and equity. Okay, back to the slides here. All right, so the agenda for the remainder of my comments here are sort of a recap on the creation of the ordinance from conception to today, review current accountability structures for law enforcement, summarize the board and the ordinance details, and talk about next steps if approved. So, to recap, this slide gives an overview of public touch points on this topic. I'm just going to zoom in on a few highlights. The concept of this ordinance in its current form goes back to the June 2020 anti-racism resolution, which specifically directed city staff to research and make recommendations to council for creating a community advisory board for the Ferndale Police Department, as recommended by the 21st Century Community Policing Model. Following that resolution, there have been a number of models reviewed, including the possibility of reimagining and repurposing our underutilized civil service board. But ultimately, in February of this year at a council meeting, City Council directed the Ordinance Committee to draft a baseline ordinance. I and others involved in drafting the ordinance looked at similar ordinances from other cities like Ann Arbor, reviewed materials like the Implementation Guide for the 21st Century Policing Model, the U.S. Department of Justice report on approaches and implementation for citizen review of police, and the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement materials, which are rich with information on this topic. The draft ordinance was shared directly with council members in July and posted online with a survey for public comments and feedback for a few weeks in July and August. The Ordinance Committee reconvened in September, reviewed the comments, made additional revisions, which brings us to the present. Let's go to the next slide. This is a reminder about a significant shift in the city's accountability structure when voters approved a charter amendment in 2010. Prior to the amendment, certain department heads, specifically the police chief, the fire chief, the city manager, the city clerk, and the city attorney, all reported directly to city council, which is made up of 5 part-time elected officials. The 2010 charter amendment reorganized that structure so that all department heads report to the city manager, giving better accountability and organizational structure, especially for day-to-day operations. So as applied to the police department, the chart on the left shows the previous structure with the police department operating somewhat independently and reporting to city council. On the right, we see that now the police chief is accountable to the city manager, who's accountable to city council. The citizen complaint process and investigation process, we'll talk a little bit more about those when we get into the meat of the ordinance, but for now I'm going to talk about response to resistance, or as is more commonly referred to, use of force. The chart on the left outlines the processes in place for documenting and reviewing when an officer uses force during an interaction with a citizen. Any use of force must be documented. It's reviewed by a sergeant and lieutenant. There's a second review by the captain and a person within the police department who's designated as sort of the subject matter expert on response to resistance. Records are logged in along with the findings and disposition of the command staff who reviewed the incident. If command staff find that the officer's conduct violated policy, an internal investigation will commence, which could result in a variety of forms of discipline. And all of this is sort of housed underneath the police chief's discretion and jurisdiction and designees. But there may be an external investigation by the Oakland County Sheriff's Department that might follow if there's reason to believe that an officer's actions were criminal. And finally, for any incident that results in serious injury, an internal investigation is conducted, as well as an investigation and review by the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office. And then on the...
Excuse me, Councilman, is that your laptop making that noise over there?
If it is, you can close the lid.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I just hear ringing.
Or maybe my phone's ringing while I'm
sorry.
away from it, sorry.
I'm sorry for the interruption.
No, that's okay. Give me a second to pause. The column on the right of the screen here sort of describes the fair and impartial policing policy and process. It's my understanding that on a monthly basis, supervisors review 2 randomly selected interactions where they can view documents and body cam footage to screen for bias or policy violations. So let's get into the board and the ordinance details and talk about what processes would be added. Let's start with the purpose, and I'm going to pull additional language straight from the ordinance. The purpose of the board is to provide greater transparency for police conduct complaints and use of force reports and the processes that follow, to conduct racial impact assessments of current police department policies, to improve and strengthen police and community relations, to foster open communication between police leadership and the community at large, to provide the city, and specifically the city manager, with an independent report and recommendation for police conduct complaints on appeal and uses of force, to monitor implementation and accreditation of the 20% policing model and related community policing programs, and to review multi-jurisdictional cooperative law enforcement agreements for consistency with the city's values. A few details about the board. As drafted, we're proposing that 5 residents would serve on the board. Terms would be 3 years, and the proposed text would cap board members at 3 consecutive terms. So after a maximum of 9 years, members would not be eligible for reappointment. Like most other boards and commissions, candidates would be able to apply for consideration. The mayor would review and select appointees, which would be reviewed and confirmed by City Council at an open meeting. Meetings shall occur no less than quarterly, and again, like most other boards and commissions, subject matter experts would be ideal for membership on the board, so candidates should highlight their experience with mediation, mental health or social work, anti-racism or equity, restorative or transformational justice, law enforcement or criminal justice, or that they come from vulnerable segments of the community. And this slide highlights some of the transparency mechanisms. There would be an annual report by the board, meeting materials would be posted for the public to view, and all meetings would be subject to the Open Meetings Act. This slide talks about the current citizen complaint process, along with the additions to that process that are proposed in this ordinance. Excuse me. Ferndale Police can receive complaints verbally or in writing. And as an aside, I just want to acknowledge that some departments are much more rigorous in their complaint process, requiring citizens fill out a specific form. But Chief Emmy advised that any form of communication that complains about an officer's conduct is treated as a citizen complaint here, which kind of opens up that process more so than being rigid and narrow. Now, if this ordinance is adopted and the board is established, as soon as a complaint is submitted, the board would automatically get a copy of that complaint. The investigation is assigned and should be completed within 45 days, whereupon the complainant, the city manager, and the board members will be provided with the findings and results of the chief's investigation. Now, what this adds to the process is, the next slide, apologies. The proposed ordinance adds an appeal process that doesn't currently exist. If a complainant doesn't agree with the results of their complaint, they can submit an appeal to the city manager's office, which would trigger a review by this board. The board can review the documented materials, can invite the complainant to attend and discuss the matter, and invite the chief to attend and discuss the matter. The board will deliberate and submit a report and recommendation to the city manager's office. They can recommend either reversal or sustaining the chief's findings. They can also provide comments or critiques of the chief's findings and recommended training if needed. The board's report and recommendation would be available to the public. There's another mechanism, though, by which the, I'm sorry that my slides didn't go as quickly as my mouth did. I apologize. There is also an optional non-appeal review where if a majority of these board members wanted to review the outcome of a complaint, but the complainant did not submit an appeal, a majority of the board members can request that they have the opportunity to review the materials. Again, they could invite the complainant and invite the police chief. The process is the same. It just gives the board the option to elect to do it without an appeal if they feel that that's appropriate. And then there's also an opportunity if that the board can review all of the use of force reports, also referred to as response to resistance reports. And again, the board may provide comments and recommendations to the police chief regarding their review and findings on those items. Now, before I talk about the next steps, I want to talk about a couple of other items. I want to talk about the fact that the board is also tasked with other advisory duties, like conducting racial impact assessments, fostering open communication between police leadership and the community, monitoring implementation of the 21st century community policing model. The ordinance leaves a fair amount of flexibility to the board on how to tackle those tasks, but the due process considerations of the citizen complaint appeal and the use of force review are given a bit more structure and definition. So now I will touch on the next steps. In full disclosure to the public, these next steps and the estimated dates presume that the ordinance is adopted tonight. I anticipate that potentially between public comment and council input, there may be some additional revisions before final approval. I hope that through tonight's discussion, we can build consensus around any sticking points and bring this back to the body as quickly as possible. In anticipating some of those questions, I do have a little bit more prepared. I wanted to talk about the fact that there are a number of these boards or commissions established in other cities throughout Michigan. Probably the biggest and the most well-known, potentially the oldest, is the Board of Police Commissioners that was established in 1974 by the Detroit City Charter. I also learned through this process, I did not know this before, but Public Act 120 of 1990 requires that any public university that establishes a public safety department must first establish an oversight committee before it can delegate public safety duties to their own police department separate from the municipality that serves them. So the University of Michigan, Central Michigan University, Michigan Tech, and other universities have committees comprised of faculty, staff, and students to review complaints and make recommendations based on their findings. Several cities in Michigan also have some version of a citizen review and/or advisory board. Those communities include Muskegon, Lansing, Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, Kalamazoo, and Benton Harbor. And study committees or other citizen groups have recommended establishing similar boards, at least in East Lansing, Chelsea, and Battle Creek, probably others. Those were just easily findable ones. So if we move forward, Ferndale would be ahead of its local peers, but certainly not unique in the state. So why do all of this? Ferndale Police has a low number of complaints, 7 last year, and so far we're on track for this year to have, I think, even less. I think there's been 4 so far this year. A small number of uses of force, 25 last year, again, on track to meet or be below that this year. Even citations and arrests are on track to be lower this year than in 2019, which is the most recent pre-pandemic comparator. And so many community members will say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And some cities do establish these boards in the wake of a serious incident, usually a high-profile use of deadly force, for example. But why wait until a tragedy strikes to react rather than be proactive? Besides, for citizens who've had a life-altering interaction with police in our community, establishing this board is already long overdue. And having this board in place will provide an appeal process for citizen complaints that does not currently exist, provide a permanent mechanism for direct community input to law enforcement, build trust between both community members and police, provide an opportunity for 5 residents at a time to get much deeper insight into our police department, which they can share with the wider community. It would bring us into alignment with the 21st century community-oriented policing model that we committed to, and it would demonstrate the city's commitment to equity, anti-racism, community engagement, and transparency. But why pick on police? They already have a difficult job that's scrutinized by the public. Why not give them the same attention as the fire department, DPW, or code enforcement, or other departments? And that's a fair question. But it highlights the need to continue conversations about what a human rights commission could look like, but law enforcement is unique in the authority and responsibility that we give them. No other city department has issued weapons, nor are they authorized to use up to deadly force or arrest citizens. And this board isn't intended to pick on the police or build acrimony. Its purpose is to build trust and transparency. According to National Gallup polling data, Americans' confidence in police dropped to a record low of 48% in 2020. If you break those numbers out by race, 56% of white Americans had confidence in police, whereas only 19% of Black Americans could say the same. Those numbers rebounded ever so slightly in 2021, but there's still much more work to be done. A citizen-led board can help us get much further in our shared goals than the city could accomplish on its own. My experience with volunteers in other communities who serve on these boards has demonstrated that there are highly motivated community members with untapped expertise who can approach these sensitive issues with energy, empathy, and ingenuity. Because the stakes are so high and public confidence is so low, I urge that we proceed with this ordinance, if not tonight, then with some thoughtful revisions and return for approval shortly. And I might not be able to answer all of your inside baseball questions, but I know Chief Emmy can talk about current processes to the extent that you have questions about that. And I'll do my best to answer questions in terms of the intentions and what we'd like to get out of this ordinance.
Thank you so much for your concise and in-depth presentation. I'm going to open it up for questions from council at this time, for either Councilwoman James and or the police chief or the city manager. Who would like to start? Any questions?
Couldn't have been that good.
Go ahead.
I was just complimenting.
Oh, okay. Through the chair. Thank you very much for going through all that material. I know it was a lot, and I appreciate you taking the time to develop it. And we have been in communication outside of council, one-on-one, which doesn't violate any rules. I presented a number of questions. I didn't want to blindside you, so I'm going to go through them. So my first one is, what problem are we trying to solve, and how will this ordinance solve it?
So this is a tricky spot because we don't know what we don't know, right? We can speculate as to what could have occurred differently over the last couple of years if this board had already existed. But I think the most important sort of overarching problem or opportunity, if you choose to look at it that way, is that, we are an integral part of a wider network and system that involves law enforcement. And when one of our public institutions has such low confidence among the public, especially a marginalized and disadvantaged segment of the public, I think it's our duty to work toward bridging that gap and improving that confidence.
I know one of the purposes of this ordinance is to allow an opportunity for a citizen to appeal a complaint that they made. Is there another process that we could put into place before this ordinance to determine if we had a problem? Because as you said, we don't know what we don't know. Is it possible that we could dedicate a person within our city manager's office to contact how many did you say we had this year? 4 or 5 complaints?
I think 4 so far
Okay.
this year, 7 all of last year.
That we could contact those 4 or 5, 7, whatever we get in the year, and have a conversation with them. Maybe it is a city manager, and say, are you happy with the results of this? Is there anything else you would like to continue? Rather than invest the energy of creating a board and going through all of this formal process to find out we really don't have a problem, for 7 or 8, incidences a year, which might turn into one that actually comes to the board.
Well, I'll answer that in 2 ways. One, this board isn't merely designed to review appeals of citizen complaints. That's one component that I think adds an important due process layer and transparency layer, which would not necessarily exist if this were being done by city staff alone. But I think more importantly, it really embodies the concept that was initiated back in 2020, which is community-oriented, community-led. So far, we have not established any community or resident leadership in this process. I think that the police and the city have done quite a good job doing sort of internal processes and decision-making, but we really need residents to be leading this as well. That is the entire essence of this model.
If this ordinance was in place 2 years ago, what events that took place in the past 3 years would have been avoided had this ordinance been in place then?
Again, it's hard to speculate. I will speculate since you asked, but there was one lawsuit, for example, that identified a cultural competency gap that we had related to Muslim women wearing hijabs, right? That was something that as soon as the police department became aware of it, Chief Emmy acted quite quickly in changing that policy, getting input from institutions that have more cultural knowledge about Muslim residents, and I believe there's been some additional training since then as well. When we're being led by residents, they have the potential to bring these things to our attention before it's overlooked and someone brings it to our attention because they feel hurt by something that happened to them.
Okay, so based on what you just said, does that mean that this board will review all of the current policies that the department has and make recommendations?
They can, yes. The purpose is to do racial impact assessments of the current policies And they can also make recommendations for any policies or innovations that they feel the community needs.
But those could only be identified if those particular members were on that board that understood. For example, you could have had a board of 5 people that didn't understand Muslim culture and may have never even witnessed that a policy wasn't put in place to avoid that problem. So we could have had that problem anyways. I know there's a lot of what ifs.
Totally. Yep. We're doing a lot of sort of guessing as to what could happen, but I think the point that you raised highlights the importance of really casting a wide net and encouraging members of vulnerable populations to engage with this board, whether they apply for membership or communicate with this board. You know, it's not like the board is intended to have 5 members, right? But these 5 members are really tasked with, in some ways, being ambassadors to the community and getting community input. So they're not limiting themselves to the lived experience of these 5 people. We hope to have, like I said, vulnerable and marginalized voices on the board, and they should be extending the invitation to community members to communicate with them regardless of what their background is as members.
So if a report is submitted by a citizen, how will this impact police officers, staff sergeants, lieutenants within the department?
I don't think it, again, you're asking my perspective on a role that I don't play. They wouldn't be directly involved in the process. They wouldn't be called out on the carpet at these meetings. It would be the chief who would attend these meetings to report on behalf of the police department. And one would hope that to the extent that this group would be, planning community engagement opportunities and sort of building bridges between the police department and the community, one would hope that there would be dialogue and engagement and relationship building. But as a formal matter, there wouldn't be any direct responsibility of patrol officers and non-command staff.
Yes.
Let's offer an opportunity for other council people to ask questions, and then we'll come back to you.
That's fine.
Are there other council members who would like to ask questions as well?
If I may, through the chair, there have been lots of discussions regarding this board, and then I've also had the privilege to ask questions one-on-one of the Mayor Pro Tem, James, as well. But now I see that I suspect that when the time comes, this may be a board that may draw a lot of interest. So, and I see that the mayor is to, based on what I'm seeing here, the mayor is to appoint the citizens. So I guess my question is, will it be the mayor who is going through the application process, or I guess I could be asking the mayor, what would be the process? Would it be something along the lines of the boards and commissions of how you go about that? Or how would you kind of gauge your selection process?
Through the chair, I believe we would be adhering to the boards and commissions process that was outlined back in 2020. Is that correct?
But if I may.
And one other, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Your Honor, through the chair, the mayor is the approving party, but it is with the consent of council. So it has to be ratified or confirmed by council as to the proposed appointment as drafted.
Yes, and if I may add on top of all that, I see this as a startup board, and I would presume that there would be a similar application process, that of the facilities task force, of an open call, and review and vetting them. And I had conversations with all of you about the facilities task force members of how we came to consensus on the final group. I see that as a group exercise, not me just solely picking and choosing out of the list of, or the people who submitted an application. And then after the first seating, if there's changeover over time, then the application process would follow exactly like the boards and commission. An open seat comes up, someone may resign early, term ends, they don't resume, the process would just be the same under boards and commissions. But startup, I would totally work with everybody on council.
And just as a reminder, there is some guidance in the ordinance on desired qualifications that should be included in any type of, open call for applicants, and that the mayor would be obligated, I think, to consider in the selection process.
Through the chair, can I go ask a question off of this topic? Thank you. I know you wanted to have other people, but will there be staff or a council person liaison as we have with all other boards?
That is a good question, and I want to say that the answer is yes, but I am not sure that I can quickly tell you the language in the ordinance that alludes to that.
I may have breezed over that quickly. I apologize if I did.
Through the chair, the boards and commissions ordinance actually assigns the responsibility of an appointment of staff liaison to the city manager.
Thank you.
In this case, I'd have a conflict of interest, so I would have to have an appointment. I won't say what I would likely do, but I would have an appointment.
And I probably should have consulted the boards and commissions ordinance to the extent that that is an overlay on top of any board or commission. I didn't think to focus on that for the presentation, however. But I'm glad that it came up in the discussion so that people are aware.
I didn't think of it until we had the conversation.
Right.
So.
We did talk about it in the ordinance committee discussions.
Councilwoman Kulski, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, I just have comment.
Okay. I'm going to stick with questions right now. I know you've gone through this consistently with Councilwoman James since March. Us three haven't been in the weeds as much as you have. So, do you mind if I ask one now? Yeah. I think we've all gone through the pros and cons of this approach here. I have some questions about the operations of it all, and wanted to bring in two pieces of context before I launch into my question. Mm-hmm. When we started this process, you and I said, is this supposed to replace the Civil Service Board? Because the Civil Service Board is outdated and no longer meeting the needs of the city, of police and fire, civil service, and our volunteers have said this is no longer an applicable board. But we have to keep posting agendas and having meetings because it's in the charter. And at the start of this process, we thought this review board could replace the Civil Service Board. You mentioned it a little bit in your presentation, but can you talk a little bit more about why that doesn't? And this is all relevant because under former Dan Martin mayor, came up with a policy is that council should not be creating more boards and commissions without talking about the costs and time of creating boards and commissions. Yep. And it doesn't sound like this is going to cancel or replace Civil Service Board.
So, I don't remember the time frame. If Denicia remembers, she can pipe in. But she and I interviewed the current members of the Civil Service Board. In full disclosure, I used to serve on the Civil Service Board. I think for just about a year, which means less than a year's worth of meetings, because so many of them were canceled because we had nothing to do. But in interviewing the current members of the Civil Service Board, it was quickly clear in our conversations that repositioning that existing board wasn't ideal, because while there is some overlap, that board is really designed at looking through more of like an HR civil service lens. And so a lot of those board members do have more of an HR, employment law type of background. So it no longer looked like a good fit to just sort of translate one board into another. However, it is also my understanding that the Civil Service Board, because their role is so limited and has been, many of their duties have been subsumed by professional HR staff. So we now have a full-time HR department that does a lot of the work that traditionally would have been done by this volunteer board. This is a very sort of antiquated system going back to our original city charter in the 20s. Most cities have shifted to HR staff. So I think there's still potential for winding down that board mechanically or procedurally. That requires a charter amendment, which requires a ballot initiative or an action by council to put it on the ballot with ballot language. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that was proposed several years ago and rejected for reasons that are not entirely clear to me. I hope, Greg can tell me, I hope that through some additional public education and maybe the spirit of this commission will replace some of the concerns that residents might have had with eliminating a civil service board. You know, like I said, I don't know for sure. But I think separate from this, there still may be a recommendation to retire the Civil Service Board down the road. And, you know, at various times, candidly, you know, we need to look at our other boards and commissions and see what activities might be winding down or wrapping up, and see if there are opportunities for scaling back there holistically.
And then on top of that, my other question was operations, staff capacity, and we also said cost. And can you talk a little bit about the cost of a racial impact assessment? Like how broad, how many? Like what's the cost? Do we need to set aside money to do that?
Not for the purposes of the ordinance. Like I said, we left some of the more advisory duties flexible until we know what our board composition and expertise is going to be. It may, well, again, I can get into speculating what the board might decide to do, but at this time, there's no particular costs that are being recommended to sort of red mark or, what's the word I'm looking for? Set aside for this board. And so we have a better idea of what their priorities are going to be, their processes, and how they'd like to approach the general purposes that they're tasked with.
Okay. And then finally, this is directed to the police chief, and it's about accreditation. I don't recall, I think this is just a yes and no question. I don't recall, but is there any sort of racial impact assessments as part of accreditation in that? Is it moving towards that, do you think, in the future?
No, that's not currently one of the standards for the MACP accreditation program.
Okay,
Doesn't mean it won't be in the future, but as it stands now, it's not.
okay, thank you. All right, I'll open it back up, you guys. More questions?
I have more questions.
I just a little simple housekeeping. Because I see a lot of work generating out of this board, potentially. It probably be made clear that this is not a paid position.
Correct.
This is a volunteer position,
Correct.
because I think we have one board that is a paid position. Is it the taxes?
It's the Board of Review.
Board of Review.
For the,
So,
tax
just to
assessment.
kind of make that clear, but other than that, I'll leave comments to, as the mayor recommended, we'll leave the questions and comments till after.
Through the chair. So getting back to my series of questions, if a report is determined that an officer did violate a policy, and it was brought to the board, and the board reviewed it, what is the process that will happen at that point?
Your question, Councilman, is if there's a complaint and then it is appealed to the board?
Well, initially, so there's a complaint was made, the department, you reviewed it, you found out that the officer was in violation, and I'm assuming you're going to take action. But eventually, the board is going to get a copy of that complaint, even though action was already taken place. And maybe they suggest other, maybe additional or different recommendations of the disciplinary actions to the officer.
Oh, I guess this is a question for me, sorry. So, and just to clarify the reason why I thought it was a question for him to start with, to the extent that the chief finds that there was some sustained misconduct or policy violation, however it's characterized, he'll still recommend a course of disciplinary action. Upon review, the board reports to the city manager and ultimately makes a recommendation on either agreeing with the chief's findings or suggests to the city manager that he reverse the chief's findings. They might give some input, on the specific findings and, why they evaluate them differently. And they can make recommendations for policy changes, training, new training or different training, or some other action of that nature. But due to, and my understanding is due to the collective bargaining agreements, this board won't have an active role in deciding disciplinary mechanisms themselves. I think those are outlined within strict parameters that the advice and recommendations aren't going to intrude into the disciplinary process. Now the board members may have opinions on that process and may express them, but there might be some limitations on what the city manager can do with that. But regardless, I think that even if they can't sort of get into that process itself, the added transparency and opinion itself, I think, is highly significant in giving the city manager's office guidance, in giving the chief guidance, in giving us guidance for the future.
And this is my last one, I promise, unless it triggers another one.
If I was wrong about how I framed anything, please jump in and let me know, city attorney and city manager.
We're seeing that the frequency this board meets is no less than 4 times per year. Is that going to be a set quarterly meeting, or is it going to be ad hoc?
So I can't remember exactly which group of us on the ordinance committee kind of batted that around a little bit. I think it's going to be largely up to the board in the early stages to sort of set how they want to approach this schedule. Now, there are some timelines built into the ordinance about, having a review meeting. I think it's within 30 days of the appeal. And so it might make sense for this group to have a monthly date set aside where they may meet. But, they may elect not to if there's not a live issue. They might want to spend additional time in between meetings if it's not needed to sort of plan for the next planned meeting if they want to, establish more of an advisory or community engagement discussion. Or maybe they'll want to meet every single month to have some type of community engagement or open call or learning opportunity. We kind of wanted to give them some discretion with a floor.
Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking about it based on what I read, and if they were to meet, say, January, April, July, October, if someone submits a report in early March, the investigation might not be completed for 45 days. Which would be about mid-end of April. If the board meets in early April, then the board won't be able to manage that complaint until their July meeting. And at that point, it's going to be like 120 days after the report was submitted, and all of this action has already been taken with the police department. It really wouldn't serve very much of a service to the city, the police department, so.
And if I may, we might not have board quorum. We know that on a lot of our boards and commissions, we don't have quorum due to vacations, holidays, and things like that. And so how would that timing impact all of this? The way that it's written, I feel like would put staff in a bind and not meet the original intent. So I think there needs to be some flexibility looked at there.
I hear that, and I think, this is one of those situations where, through committee writing and then revisions based on public input, we're putting forth our best intentions for this body to be able to move relatively quickly to provide some finality to the process. We don't want to extend things, infinitely. But maybe we do need to examine some of those timeframes carefully to make sure that we're building in, a little bit of buffer for the types of situations that you're proposing.
I guarantee you won't have quorum like in July. And some other busy away months for people, because it's a volunteer board, and that is normal part of the process.
Yeah.
They're not, right?
Yep.
Well, and I think it would be important to have them ad hoc. Let the events determine when they need to have a meeting, because you still have to have a 7-day notice. So if you determine on Monday that you need to have a meeting because a complaint came in and there's been an investigation and it gets to that point, then then you can say, okay, we're going to have a meeting next Monday. Who's available? And at that point, maybe not everybody's available on Monday. You have it on Wednesday, but at least you have that 7-day period. The group might meet, February, May, and June, and then not meet again until November, based on what events took place.
They're also, just as a reminder, they're also meeting more than the appeals process. They have other items to talk about. Accreditation is annual, so they could be giving feedback on that as well. If there could be some sort of Like zoning board of appeals only meets when there's an applicant. But the civil service board by charter has to meet monthly, and so the staff has to go through this process where it's unnecessary.
Right.
Even though there's no business, they still have to do administrative work to say there's no business. So there's got to be an in-between there. So if that's something that we could take a look at as well.
Well, through the chair, if I may, just on the committee, I think that was my recommendation. I think the intent was to set a minimum of 4 meetings per year so that they would stay engaged if there was no business to attend to. So it's not limiting them to a quarterly meeting or limiting them to 4 meetings. It just sets a minimum that they have to meet at least 4 times a year.
If I may, through the chair, just one more question. It sounds like that in terms of an appeal, then these meetings would be subject to Open Meetings Act, where there would be, participants could attend.
Yes.
But there sounds like there also be some situations where these meetings would not be open to the public. Am I correct in that? Like if for different situations, or are they all open to the public?
Through the chair, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this would be a deliberative body making recommendations to the city manager's office, so it would be subject to the Open Meetings Act.
Period, no matter what the topic. Okay.
Yep. Now, the contents of some of the documents may require redactions of, personal information that isn't germane to the issue at hand. It would go through a very similar process as FOIA records would go through.
And can you follow up on that? Because I had a follow-up question too. There is a citizens review of police approaches and implementation. It's from the Department of Justice. That has been my learning tool of the range of approaches that a city could implement. And, they have 9 oversight systems that they go through for big and large cities. And we are definitely in the small city category based off of the number of sworn-in officers. We have about, 41 sworn officers, and everybody in this report is like, the lowest number of sworn officers was 333, and that was with Flint. And this report's a little old. So I'm curious to learn more about Ypsilanti's approach to theirs. But one thing this report has on page 8 is that a lot of these hearings are private, but general public invited to meetings to express concerns, or reviews are closed, or results are not public, and hearings are closed. It's really interesting to see what is closed and what is open to public. And I know information is going to be redacted, but it sounds like our approach here is everything is open and public. Can you help me understand why a city would make it closed? Hearings are closed or reviews are closed. I'm not sure what the difference between a review and a hearing would be. Or monitoring is private, but the appeal process is public.
So there's a lot of different models and a lot of different variations. Some of these boards, particularly in larger and frankly more resourced communities, they may have subpoena power and more sort of investigative heft to them. I would imagine that those models would require additional layers of confidentiality and just a lot of additional both administrative and work for the board itself. Given the varieties that are out there, I can tell you that I personally looked heavily at Ann Arbor's model, largely because I know the chair of that independent review board. She's a very robust participator in All-Pact, which is a group that the chief and Officer Maulmeister and I all participate in. So that, that was a model that I was familiar with and comfortable with. So that partially is what influenced our template, if you will.
More questions, you two? Because I have another one.
Nope, I'm questioned out.
One of my concerns is police recruitment. I think in the last 2 years, recruitment for public safety has changed, sort of like mid-20 pandemic and after the George Floyd murder. And we are definitely in a harder market now for recruitment. I would like to see some sort of evaluation as part of this ordinance to say if there is an impact on recruitment. It's my understanding that we are setting a higher standard with this review board out of any city in Oakland County, and our competition for recruitment of police officers is bigger cities. So I'm interested, as such, so many speculative questions are up tonight because we just don't know, but one of my speculative questions that would have a real impact on our department is if this is impacted by recruitment. I don't think it is. I think it's designed in a way that has enough oversight of the city manager and police chief, follows our current HR policies. But it is such a change that could deter someone from choosing to work here. Speculative, don't know. It also could be a recruitment as well. But I just don't know. Is there a way to craft something in this ordinance that puts a year evaluation or a...
So we talked about that a little bit in the ordinance committee discussions. If I remember correctly, you'll have to forgive me because we've had a couple of conversations over the course of most of the year. So I think we talked about that and contemplated putting an explicit sunset in the ordinance. We opted not to include that in the proposed text, although I believe that the consensus of the ordinance committee supported the concept of proactively reviewing this at some periodic time, a year, year and a half, whatever makes sense, so that it gets established and gets rolling, to sort of assess how often complainants are availing themselves of appeals, how often the board is making some recommendation that's different or supplemental to what the chief has recommended, to see if it's doing the work that we hoped it would do, and giving this body or future members of this body the opportunity to make revisions or start from scratch if necessary. I think that's a good practice in general. We just opted not to put an explicit sunset or timetable in the text.
Is it possible, as part of a motion, whether it's tonight or, in the near future, to put in an annual or first review of startup 1 year review of some sort? I know, there's supposed to be a report, but the report hasn't been developed. We have no idea what will be in it. I don't want this item to be lost as part of that, rather than insert it in the ordinance language and then create problems 5 years from now that we can't meet an annual review for some other reason.
And frankly, I would ask the city manager and city staff for a recommendation because, from an operational standpoint, they're the ones who are ultimately responsible for bringing this up for, review to the city council. So to whatever extent a mechanism would be most effective and useful to staff, I think your input would be important.
Through the chair, sunsets are typically used as kind of refresh and review tools for new processes and ordinances. We could certainly spend the next 2 weeks discussing with the police department and human resources on some ideas about how we might ascertain potential impact, no impact on the program.
Yeah, I would feel more comfortable about having clarity on that before passing this, as well as work out the timing of months and days of the review process. And then I think of startup and then steady state. That's kind of how first year is startup, and then after the first year is steady state. I think.
Through the chair, are we making recommendations for edits on the document at this point?
You know, I am of the opinion that it needs more tweaking, and I would prefer to send this back for tweaking rather than an up or down vote today, because I think there's been too much effort to put in this to end the process right now, because there's just small edits I think that would make me feel more comfortable in clarifying some key points.
Can we make recommendations for changes at this point in time?
I mean, if you don't mind me
I would like to get
weighing in.
Yes, I was going to get your opinion.
You know, as this meeting approached, I certainly thought about the prospect of, you know, do we push to approve this tonight? You know, the reality is this is the first time that this body has had the opportunity to discuss this as a whole. You know, we've had some individual conversations, you know, but to the extent that any one council member has a strong feeling about this or that, you can't really build consensus one-on-one. And so I think tonight is our opportunity to point those items out and build consensus around anything that would cause someone to vote no.
I think that says edits are welcome for recommendation.
Yeah, was that a wordy way of saying, yeah, make a if you're not comfortable passing it tonight, tell us what would make you more comfortable, and let's see if we can work it out.
I think that's where I am, and I would, I always hate kicking things back to the ordinance committee, because I know how hard you guys work to get it to this point. But this is new. This is.
It's very complex,
It's
Mayor.
complex. It's sensitive, and it's complex.
Your Honor, do you want to have that dialogue of potential edits now, or do you want comments from council members to go to the city manager for, you know, given the concerns regarding making sure the product is thoroughly vetted and reviewed?
I think that we can take some high-level edits tonight, like I've just suggested. If y'all have like grammar edits, do not talk about them tonight.
Right.
Greg did point out one grammar edit already.
We don't need to talk about grammar edits. Send those to Kat and the city manager, sorry, Councilwoman James. But if they're substantial, I think in a open of transparency, which is the review board is supposed to be about, is to comment on what you would like to be discussed further.
And I appreciate that, Mayor, because I know that there are, you know, Councilwoman Leaks May and I have not talked about this one-on-one. Councilwoman Mikulski and I have not talked about this one-on-one. So I'm very interested in what edits they may suggest. And I'm very much interested in them hearing what edits I'd like to suggest. So I'm glad that you're open to that dialogue this evening.
Councilwoman Leaks May, are there anything that you would like to focus on or direct the ordinance committee to dive in a little bit deeper on?
Well, Right now, just one thing that I see here in the presentation, it says the appeal hearing shall be open to the public unless subject to an appropriate exemption authorized by the Open Meetings Act. That's why I asked, was it open to, all the meetings are open? So what would cause an exemption? What would warrant that?
Through the chair, I think it would have to be one of the criteria in the Open Meetings Act, which would allow for an exemption.
It has statutory definitions, basically.
I think the concern for the ordinance committee, or one of the concerns, was with respect to some matter of personnel issue of a personal nature, and whether that would warrant an application of an exemption. That's, the language was put in there to capture that without necessarily going through the various possibilities of whether that exemption would apply or not. But it would have to meet the exemption requirements of the Open Meeting Act to not be a public meeting.
Through the chair, a lawsuit, an open lawsuit?
Well, that, if there's an open lawsuit, it may not even be at the committee at that point. It probably
I meant
would.
between like the employee and the city.
Possibly.
Through the chair, one of the closed session exceptions here in the Open Meetings Act would be to consider dismissal, suspension, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer. So that's a pretty broad language there that might apply to that board, but there are several exemptions in there.
I need to understand this a little bit more, what's public and what's not public, in terms of what is an officer's privacy, even though they're in a public role, what privacy do they have as part of an appeals process? I don't really understand that. Are they given any? If it's a public meeting, what is redacted? And I'm not, and I don't want to say that, I guess I don't know, I'm just asking. Should it be? Should it be all public? You said that some things are subject to FOIA.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think ultimately the existing, statutes and case law defining those statutes are going to define the parameters of what's public and what's confidential for this board. It is our intent to, because transparency is one of the significant purposes of this board, it is our intent to be able to use materials that are subject to public disclosure. And if, redacting an item makes the remainder of that document disclosable, that will be preferred as opposed to, just holding the entire review and hearing in a non-open meeting. The ordinance was drafted with the intent of using materials that are subject to FOIA, which may require redactions, and an open process with few exceptions allowed by law.
Does the city of Ypsilanti do it that way too?
I can't tell you the details of all of the, 8 or 9 boards that are in existence in Michigan. Like I said, I looked most heavily at Ann Arbor's because I was most personally familiar with it.
I am interested as part of research in bringing this back. Ypsilanti is like our peer city in terms of size and population and police force size. It would just help, even though, I love Ann Arbor. Man, if I had Ann Arbor's carbon neutral budget, if I had Ann Arbor's police budget, we would be equivalent, but we're not. And so I'm interested in learning more about our peer city, Ypsilanti, and how they do it, and if they've had any troubles with recruitment from how they do it, and what is public and what's not public.
Through the city, I have a relationship with that city. and
I
the
know you
city
do.
manager. And our council does as well, so I can reach out to my colleagues, and I'm sure Dan can reach out to their council.
Yeah, and that's what I've learned about this Department of Justice report, big, how to scale for our size and complexities and the environment in which we're working in, being poached by bigger cities, recruiting staff. It's happening in all departments, not just the police department. Are there any other recommendations?
I have several.
Of course you do.
So I'm going to go through them based on the sections.
Remember, no
Well,
grammar.
I'll be honest, I submitted a number of these back in July, but they didn't seem to make the update when it was rewritten. So I'm going to publicly make them.
Or the ordinance committee
Chose not.
discussed them or didn't put them in there,
Yeah,
for whatever reason.
that's fine. But I have an opportunity to make them public now.
I hear that.
So in section 2-31, it talks about the makeup of the board, the 5 members. Originally I requested that at least one of them have some type of law or police background. However, I'm willing to edit that in saying that the liaison should probably be someone from HR. And the reason for this is you're dealing with a lot of disciplinary action and employment policies, and someone from HR is going to be able to help guide that board into writing appropriate suggestions for disciplinary action. My fear is that the board may write something that doesn't align with the current policies in place, and nothing could be done with their suggestion. So that would be my suggestion, as a liaison, be someone from the HR department. The next item is in the same section, 2-31. The board will determine their chair. However, I think for the first setting, I think the mayor should choose the chair. And the reason for that is we don't know what the makeup of this board is going to be, and I don't want any one person to feel intimidated about putting themselves forward if they're interested in being chair. I think the mayor communicating with the five boards to find out who is interested, who isn't interested, and the reasons that they're interested, and creating that first chair would serve that board much better than a member who may force themselves into that position that we may not want to be chair.
May I offer a suggestion? The task force application had a check mark. Are you interested in being chair?
Oh.
That is something that we could add to the application as part of the vetting process, because if all applicants say they're not interested in being chair and we appoint 5 people who don't want to be chair, that's a pickle.
And just for further information, once you're talking about the facilities task force, once the facility task force was established, did it choose its own chair, or did?
There was an interview process
Okay.
of the people who indicated chairs, just to go over what the responsibilities were, time commitment.
Ultimately, I would want to treat this as similarly to other boards, commissions, task forces, what have you, as makes sense. There may be some exceptions from time to time, but for the most part, I think it should be consistent with other processes.
I think he was starting about, as I go back to startup versus steady state.
Exactly,
The
yeah.
first startup, this would only apply. So consider that as part of.
Next
Okay.
suggestion, 2-32. that talks about term limits. It's being suggested that there be a 3-year term. I propose that it be 2 years. That aligns with most, if not all, of our boards of being 2 years. I also have a concern that there's a max of 3 terms, which would mean if it's 3 years and 3 terms, that's 9 years that someone would be serving on a board. I think that's a long time to have someone on a board of this nature. I'd like to see more of a rotation of people coming on and off boards, and I don't want us or a future board or a future council to fall into the habit of, well, they've been on the board, so let's just put them back on, instead of finding out if there's new people that may be interested in being on the board.
You hear that?
The next section.
Before you move off of that one,
Oh.
I'll respond to that one, but I'm curious if anyone else has comments to adjusting the term limit.
There are some boards and commissions that have term limits, and then there's some boards and commissions that do not.
Fair enough. Yeah.
We have a, 29-year serving zoning board of appeals member.
Right. Yeah, and we did dialogue around this one, and I don't remember, there were tweaks made one way or the other at various points. And, ultimately I wanted to get this body's input on, what is the proper balance there? Because on one hand, I think this is a board that in early days will be doing a lot of learning and education for themselves. And I want to make sure that we aren't keeping the terms so tight that we're losing that investment of knowledge and including institutional knowledge. But I also see the point that, being there for too long can result in complacency and just eliminate the opportunity for new ideas.
I would entertain even a 3-year term, but limit the number of terms to 2. So you still keep it at 6 years, but you do allow a person to invest themselves in that time, 3 years as opposed to 2 years. I just believe that 9 years is a long, long time.
How long have you been on council, sir?
Yeah, but people are choosing me to be on council.
I'm not touching that one.
I mean, to that point, however, it's important to note that the folks who've been on this body for the longest provide a really important perspective on issues that those of us who haven't been around as long just don't have that basis of historical knowledge. So like I said, it's striking the right balance. I personally think that 9 is the appropriate cap. I hear your point. I defer to the body on whether there's will to adopt.
And I may be in the minority, and I'm okay with that.
Right, right. Which is why we wanted to have this discussion here rather than just.
Yeah.
If I may, through the chair, based on as far as the terms and the number of years, that will be in the application process. So, I guess I'm open to even seeing kind of what happens for this first time around.
Right.
To see if if it's not an issue, then it's not an issue.
And then finally, I had one comment, and I didn't see it in here. But do any appointees need to go through this Citizens Police Academy? It's only offered one time a year, but in October, if they get appointed in January or February, set an expectation that's part of being on the review board?
We talked about that as well. We opted not to build it in as an absolute requirement, but I think we were all in agreement that it is strongly encouraged, because that would be a highly effective part of that education process.
I have a question. Why would you prefer not to build it in?
Well, mainly because the Citizen Academy happens on a set predetermined schedule. We may get a wonderful applicant who would make an excellent board member who, due to some other conflict, just cannot attend the next scheduled session. We didn't want to preemptively eliminate otherwise excellent candidates.
Through the chair, what I would add to that is that we kept it open so that there could be other avenues of education. I do think that having some sort of educational component is crucial for the role, and I would be supportive of putting that in the ordinance, just not limiting it to a one-day event. Does that make sense?
And I expect that this board is going to be a lot like the Planning Commission, in that the Planning Commission is always learning new development, zoning. It changes annually. And I think these types of policies are going through national updating as well, with figuring out how to implement at the local level based off of these policy changes at a broader, higher level. Is that a true statement, Police Chief? Right? There was, just as an example, the 21st Century Policing came out from a national federal committee. It said, hey, cities, look at this. And our city said yes. And we looked at it, right? Those things are happening annually. We have no idea what will come out of the next Department of Justice or the next, president. That shifts or encourages the police industry to adopt something new, right? And that's an evolution just with any profession, but I expect that this review board will be staying on top of those things as they evolve, just like our other boards that deal with legal matters, which is the Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals, and this is also a legal matter on the Citizens Review Board.
If I may, Mayor, I think the recommendation to have an HR liaison is a idea. The HR director is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to collective bargaining and discipline and all the challenges that we face as administrators. And I will avail myself at their call if they have questions as to why or what's normal or industry standard. But I think that there will be a learning curve for sure. I couldn't tell you one thing the Planning Commission does. It's not where I live, but this is my house, or at least my profession. So I think at first there'll be a lot of questions, and I think it'll smooth itself out.
Mayor, I still have two.
Two more?
Two more. So the next one was section 2-35, and it talked about community. And one of the, I believe, in the language changes that you made, where I pointed out some grammatical things, I think the point you were getting to was, I think that this board should be involved in the community events that our police department puts on. For example, their neighborhood meet and greets. I think that it's imperative that members of this board, at least one member, attend every one of those, so that they have an opportunity to interact with the public, as well as showing that they're interacting with the police department, that this isn't a group that's working against the police department, but working with the police department. And I think that was your intention with the language change in that section.
And in addition to that intention, I mean, this board is tasked with sort of increasing the ability to communicate and engage with the public. So I envision that they may have their own ideas about additional opportunities for community engagement. It's wonderful that the chief hosts the street side roundtables. Some residents aren't necessarily going to be keen to come to something that the police department itself is running. They might be more inclined to come and engage at a resident-led community engagement opportunity that brings the police together with other community members. And I totally understand the good intentions of the department in hosting those, but you can't underestimate that some members of the community need to have community liaisons to reach out to take the lead for their comfort.
Thank you. And then the last one, I just want to actually thank you. I had submitted a suggested change to section 2-37, and you did implement it. Originally, it was talking about use of force, but didn't really define it. And I suggested that it be changed to a nonverbal use of force. And your term now is that force is defined as a gesture with a lethal and or less lethal weapon directed at a person. Because shouting at someone is actually considered use of force. And I didn't believe that every case of where an officer says stop, that is a use of force that this board needed to review. So I'm very happy that you did make that suggestion, or that you took my suggestion and made that change.
Where is that? I don't see that in 2-37.
2-35, I believe.
Oh, I'm sorry,
2-35?
2-5, yeah, sorry.
Within the response to resistance policy, there's definitions for what is a use of force or what triggers the use of force reporting system. And it's just important that this ordinance and that policy align. If we have to adjust the policy to come in line with this ordinance, we will do so, just to make sure that it's streamlined and that it's not clunky. We definitely want the language to match.
Sure. Thank you.
Before you step away, can you clarify, because my understanding is that, microphone, sorry. My understanding is that the reporting requirement is triggered by something beyond a verbal command, but that verbal commands are also included if that reporting requirement is triggered. Is that clear, the way that I described that, and is that accurate?
Yes. Verbal commands are part of the force continuum, if that's what we're discussing right now. But all those commands will be evaluated when any use of force incident is reviewed as the totality of the circumstances and deciding what is reasonable and not reasonable when it comes to force. Currently, a use of force report is triggered at pointing a weapon or anything more than a compliant handcuffing. If someone's to pull away and there has to be some struggle, regardless of how minimal, that is a use of force. If they comply with the handcuffing, it's considered de minimis in its force and it's not required. So that's where if that makes sense, that's where we're at, and we're happy. That's why there is a little bit of an education piece when it comes to these terminologies with the incoming board.
Thank you. Those are all my suggestions, Mayor.
Thank you. Anything else from you? Anything else from you, Councilman McCullough? All right, I think we have exhausted all of our questions and comments. Do we need a motion to table and bring back another round of a cleaned up copy and some more conversations between council people? I'll let the ordinance committee decide when it should come back to council after review. with the
There's,
city
there's no
manager?
real motion then, that's necessary then, or you could, if you indicate a motion to bring it back when ordinance committee deems it in a format ready for consideration. Doesn't really matter. But if there's no action taken, then it dies for lack of support.
I think we'll just table this for this item. I trust the ordinance committee with the city manager will bring this back in a timely manner. I just wanted to say, thank you, Councilwoman James. Excellent presentation. Your command of the subject matter is at expert level. Obviously, you're a civil rights lawyer. But the amount of time and effort you've spent on this has been tremendous, and trying to address all our concerns. Thank you for City Council for being so thoughtful and deliberate in debating. I know some of us still feel uncomfortable with certain spots, and you know, I think that's up for you to decide at the end of the day what you are comfortable with. And then I just wanted to say thank you to Police Chief Emmy for working so closely on something that is new for the police department. And I also know change and new can be unsettling, particularly when you're a leader city in a county that doesn't have other cities following suit. However, Ferndale has been a leader in the 21st century policing model. I think we were the first city to adopt it in the county, and you have been leading, and our police department and officers, detectives, everybody have been leading in this way. And Councilwoman James appropriately incited all of your accomplishments as a department. And I was beaming with pride based off of all those things that have changed since the department went in that direction. I just want to say I support our police department, I support our officers, but I think we're really trying to find another avenue of vulnerable voices to have input that traditionally have not been part of the process in Ferndale. And I think that is where the expertise of Councilwoman James has been prominent here. And I'm just grateful for everybody trying to figure something very complex, as the word you used was appropriate, Councilwoman Polika, complex and a change that I think will have positive impacts not only for the police department and officers building stronger relationships, but also for residents and visitors passing through who have to, may use our police department forces. Our perceptions begin to change. We still are dealing with negative perceptions that were perhaps created by a generation or two generations ago, and they've passed on their experiences to family members, to the next generation, about how they were treated in our community. We're not the only ones of this nature. It's the nature of our region. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you. And would you like the last word on this topic?
I gave many words. I rest on my presentation. Thank you.
All right. So with that, everybody, this item has been tabled. It's going to come back at a next council agenda recommended by the ordinance committee and the city manager. I can guarantee that when it comes back to council, we will not spend an hour and a half on it because we just did.
I think we spent more than an hour and a half,
Oh,
Mayor.
well, okay. It was a well-needed conversation to vet through. So with that, I'm going to move on to call to council and hand it over to our city manager for department updates.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it'd be most appropriate to begin with some news of the election. So I hand it off to Anthony, our city clerk.
We are well underway with all our preparations. I should say we're pretty much complete with all preparations for the election. Nothing that I get made fun of by the deputy dean, but nothing that I'm aware of that we forgot. That's what I like to say. Everything that we normally put in order is in order. We have election inspector training scheduled for the Saturday before the election. This is a refresher for all of our chairs and vice chairs and workers, and a pretty confident position right now with our election. So feeling pretty good about that. State just released some resources, which I sent you, part of their election lab. Those can be released publicly as well to help encourage education on election security and integrity and all the work we do here in Michigan. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Anthony. Next, I'll have Dana Tosk, our DPW director, talk a little bit about the vacuum cleaner you're going to be seeing on your street.
Good evening tonight. So this week marks our start of curbside leaf collection. We'll be rolling about the entire city through the course of this week, and then communications put together a beautiful map of our west side and east side route that will continue on into December. If you need to get a copy to understand what days we'll be by to pick up those leaves, it is on the city's Facebook page. It is on the DPW webpage on the city's website underneath yard waste and leaf collection. It is also in the newsletter, fall newsletter that went out September-ish, something like that. And then also if a resident does need to just get a good old-fashioned paper copy because they misplaced their newsletter, give the DPW a call and we'll figure out how to facilitate that. And then the residents that had sidewalk replacements occur earlier this fall, they should have already received the notices of the final cost assessment. If someone wishes to not have that cost put onto their taxes, they will need to pay by November 10th. In addition to those applying for hardship, they will also need to do that by November 10th, and then we will be holding the public hearing, hardship committee meeting and public hearing on November 14th, next time the council meets. And if anyone does have any questions on that process, they can contact myself. I can walk them through that and put them in contact with Emily Loomis, who will be helping review the hardship committee applications for the sidewalk replacement program. And that's all I have tonight.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. As a quick recap for everybody watching, City Council did adopt a new policy to establish a grant program funded through CDBG dollars for residents that are eligible to meet the grant requirements as stipulated by income requirements through Oakland County's CDBG rules. So that communication has gone out. That public hearing will be issued, and you could expect that hardship committee to be at the November 14th City Council meeting. So, just to recap, Kara Sokol, our Director of Communications, is going to speak a little bit on trick-or-treating downtown.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. On behalf of our DDA Director, Lena Stevens, who couldn't be here this evening, just want to remind the community of downtown trick-or-treating this Saturday, October 29th, from 3 to 5 p.m. Participating businesses will have candy to hand out, so kids can come around and do a safe trick-or-treating. And if you, like me, have kids with 4 legs and paws, instead, Maestro's Doghouse will be handing out treats behind their business to any dogs who arrive in a costume. So that's very exciting news. And then while you're out and about, take a look at all of the great window decorating through the Hollow Windows contest, I believe it's called, and submit a vote for your favorite. So that's going on Saturday. And then I also wanted to remind you from communications, we've had a number of people looking to have new compost stickers for their extra bins. And we were out a few weeks ago, which was a real problem. So we have gotten a ton of new stickers in stock. We have them at City Hall, and we also have them at the DPW yard. And anybody who wants one or more is welcome to come and get them. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Chief Robinson, you think you might have some seasonal safety messages concerning leaf piles and other winter preparations?
Yeah, so it's that time of year with, starting this week, everybody will be able to put their leaves into the street. So just a friendly reminder, do not park your car on top of the piles of leaves. Hot engines, dry leaves, bad combination. Gives us work to do, but that's not how we want it to happen. We don't want to see you lose your car. The other thing is we have seen an uptick of carbon monoxide alarms. So just a reminder for people, as our furnaces are kicking on, more people are turning them on. Make sure to have your service or your furnace checked. Make sure your furnace or your boilers working properly. Have carbon monoxide detectors in your home. There are even recommendations now for in your sleeping areas to have the combination ones, because it is odorless, colorless. You just don't know you're being impacted by it until you have symptoms, and if you're sleeping, you may not know. So keep our homes safe. We want to keep everybody safe. And for people who have wood-burning fireplaces in your home, remember to have them cleaned and inspected if you use it regularly, to make sure it stays a safe, wonderful fire and does not turn into a tragic outcome of it coming through, because our chimneys can wear out, and we want to make sure that everything stays where it's supposed to and vents out and doesn't get into the walls of your home. So just some safety things. We want everybody to have a very safe change of seasons, and we see you for good reasons. And we will be out at the trick-or-treating, the DDA downtown, and other events coming up. And on Halloween, you will see the fire engines out and about, moving through the streets, handing out candy and trying to help make sure the kids are staying safe. So look for us and say hi if you see us.
Thank you, and I'll shift over to the other chief, Chief Emby.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I would like to fill you in on the rousing success we had with our Oakland County-sponsored gun buyback program that was held this past Saturday between 10 and 2. But we only needed 45 minutes to give away $5,000 in gift cards. Wow. We took in, that $5,000 in gift cards went to collect 26 firearms. We also had a long line after that we didn't have gift cards for. People continued to surrender firearms, and we collected another 21 firearms. So far, the breakdown has been, I guess the only notable ones, we had 3 weapons that would be considered assault rifles that went for top dollar, even though some of them were, 2 of them were turned in after we were out of the gift cards. We had another weapon that was already reported as stolen, so we'll be looking into that. But I had a meeting with the county commission this afternoon and the other chiefs who were involved. They're getting tons of great feedback throughout the county, and they're looking to expand the program. There's also, I'm proud of our department to be in the, I guess, the pilot crew, but other departments may be joining in later. So stand by, and maybe we'll have a gun buyback 2.0 coming your way. But Officer Maulmeister, Sergeant Blanchard did a fantastic job. They were out there setting up cones at 8 a.m. and cars started lining up at 8:30 for a 10 o'clock start. Wow. And this was the same reaction all over the county. There's 3 other locations, and they were all the same.
Oh,
So
that is unexpected. I did not expect that.
it really was the communications team here in Ferndale, between Kara's team and Jill, and the county team did a fantastic job putting it out. And Chief Barron at Southfield actually went on, I think, Channel 2 on Thursday morning before that to drum up some more publicity. But it was really overwhelming turnout. We did not expect it.
That's incredible. Through the chair. So when we did it several years ago, there was a group that sat out in front and offered people more money for the guns they were turning in, and not one person surrendered their gun to the group. They all turned it into our department for less money. I'm curious to know if there was a group out there this time.
I don't know for sure. I know I received some emails from people interested in wanting to poach, for lack of a better term, these firearms. I encouraged them not to, and I explained to them politely why we didn't want to create that kind of scene. One, it's hard to manage, and two, it's not in the intent. It doesn't follow the spirit of what we're trying to do. It's important, you know, even if these weapons were not taken off the street per se, there's still weapons laying around homes that children or mentally ill people could still get their hands on. And now they're safe, and they're going to be tested to see if they were involved in any serious crimes, and then they'll likely be destroyed. But I'm happy to come here and report that success.
That's great.
Thank you.
That's great, Chief. I will close with just a reminder that the City Hall offices are closed in observance of Veterans Day. It is a Friday, but it's November 11th. So City Hall is closed in observance of that day. And we will be encouraging our leadership to be attending the ceremony. May?
All right. I think I started right on the last meeting.
Okay. So I have two things, and it's actually off of two conversations that just took place. The one is leaves. There are a lot of streets in Ferndale that have one-side parking, and that side parking is always limited. So when you're putting leaves out on the street, don't put them on the side that the cars go on. Put them on the side that the cars aren't parked on. It sounds so simple. And the other thing is Election Day. A lot of us in the city vote absentee. I would encourage people to please get their ballots in early. I know a number of people like to drop them off the day before or the day of. That creates a lot of work for the department when they're all planning for the day of election. There's a very lengthy process of checking in ballots and getting them to the right precinct and all of that. And when they're turned in on the day of, it takes a lot of energy out of the department. So if you know who you're going to vote for the weekend before, if you could turn that ballot in before the day of, it is greatly appreciated for us that help work the election. That's all I have, Mayor.
Right.
So a couple things, just for a family event, if you'd like to come out and support our local Ferndale High School Marching Band, they are having donuts and a show this Wednesday, October 27th from 7:30 to 9 at the Ferndale High School football field. So if you want to come out and see the show, that is fantastic. And they won again on Saturday, by the way, all captions. Please feel free to come out and see that show. Yes. Also, I just want to send out my condolences to former State Representative Vincent Gregory, former senator. I remember him being a very frequent, always showing his presence at the school board meetings when I was at a school board member. And my heart just goes out to his family. My prayers go out to his family on his sudden death. That's all that I have tonight.
I had nothing originally tonight, but since we were talking about leaves, I did want to mention to residents, it is okay to leave your leaves, as well as some of your large stemmed plants. As much as we may want to clean up our leaves and just tidy up our yards, sometimes leaving a nice little bundle of those in a protected area somewhere in your yard is really beneficial to the environment. Bumblebees, native solitary bees, do nest in those. So if you're like me and you're a little bit of a lazy gardener, please feel free to leave your leaves.
It's good for the soil, too.
It is. It's great for the soil.
That's me. I'm a lazy gardener.
Actually, I do that. I don't put my leaves out.
Right, Councilwoman James.
I don't have any announcements that I can think of, but I will request through the chair. City manager, do you know anything? I have this vague recollection that Claire Dion announced something about pumpkins and composting pumpkins after Halloween, but now I feel like I hallucinated it. Do you know anything about that?
You're not following our hashtag pumpkin plop campaign? No.
There you go.
WKRP, we're doing it.
We will be providing a pumpkin composting service this year. I actually don't have the information in front of me. I would cold call the communications director to see if she has it in front of her. Otherwise, we can certainly share that information on.
I wanted to do some pumpkin chunking out of that, but I got denied by city staff. That's how you get them in the compost bin, exactly. How to get more people to bring their pumpkins for composting. With that, if you are done?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to give brief feedback on the Michigan Municipal League Conference. Councilwoman Leaks May and I were in Muskegon last week, Tuesday through Friday, and joined by our city manager and assistant to the city manager, Denicia. But Councilwoman Leaks May is on the board of trustees for the Michigan Municipal League, and I am a ghost of presidents past, always invited, so I go. But there was a great, wonderful conversation connecting with all the public officials. MML always has inspiring and uplifting conferences because we deal with very difficult topics, and some key topics that everybody is still from elected officials still worried about is polarization, sort of toxicity of public comments and people interacting with public officials. On a positive side, there is so much money coming out of the federal government for local investment, but it's all grant driven. And so there's a lot of support to help cities access this money based off of what they're eligible for. And for me, one of the most interesting sessions that I was in was all the funding opportunities for climate sustainability and energy efficiency. I was amazed at how much money is coming out for weatherization, electrification, adaptation, improved accessibility, pollution reduction, solar, particularly for energy efficiency credits for homes. And a lot of these are oriented towards homeowners whose income eligible. So they're targeting lower income individuals to get these tax credits to shift into more energy efficiency upgrades to their home. And I am really encouraged by one where there is grants for forestry and a ton of trees, and just lots of opportunity to fulfill, objectives out of our climate action plan and keep the Ferndale Environmental Sustainability Commission active. And I have one of these for you, Councilman Mikulski, just to review.
I'm on that commission now.
Oh, you are on that commission? Okay, well then you get it, but I have 2 extra if you want one.
Oh, great.
So with that, we go to these things to learn, to network, and bring back new ideas. And I brought back a pair of sunglasses from another city that was handing them out. And I won the Play-Doh Sculpting competition in one of my sessions. So you just don't know how your creative side will come out. And with that, I adjourn this meeting at 9:54. Happy.
The one from Pasopolis?
Yes, yes.